The first time Willa Hartwell heard the Alpha King's wolf, the wolf was accusing a chicken pot pie of being a marriage proposal. The second problem was that Alpha King Alden Blackthorn looked like a man who had never proposed to anything in his life, including dinner. The third problem was that Willa was the only person in Briar Glen who could hear the wolf yelling, "Take the pie, you beautiful idiot." She stood in the middle of the harvest square with flour on her sleeves, a loose braid falling over one shoulder, and a covered basket full of chicken pot pies warming both hands. Around her, the whole town held its breath. Briar Glen could survive drought, wolves in the orchard, and Mrs. Bellamy's annual plum wine, but it had never learned how to behave around royalty. Alpha King Alden Blackthorn had just dismounted from a black horse near the well. He wore a long, dark coat, riding gloves, and the expression of a man who could turn a bake sale into a military inspection by blinking too slowly. His hair was black, his eyes were amber brown, and every line of his face looked carved for command rather than conversation. Willa made a proper curtsy. It was not an elegant curtsy. Bakers who had been awake since 4 a.m. did not have spare strength for elegance. She lifted the basket. "Welcome to Briar Glen, Your Majesty. My mother sent these from Hartwell Bakery." Alden took one warm pie with 2 fingers, as if accepting a sealed treaty. Inside him, his wolf lost every ounce of royal discipline. "She fed us." Brindle's voice thundered through Willa's skull with holy delight. "The woman has chosen us. Take the pie. Smile." No, not like a tax notice. Willa did not move. She had learned, very young, not to move when she heard things no one else could hear. The Alpha King looked at the chicken pot pie. Then he looked at Willa. His face remained firm, handsome, and severe enough to make the fiddler stop tuning. Nothing in his human expression suggested that his inner wolf was planning a wedding over gravy and pastry crust. "Thank you," Alden said. "Do not thank her like you are signing a road tax," Brindle groaned inside him. "Show teeth, but romantically, carefully. Humans hate the wrong teeth." Willa lowered her eyes to the basket before laughter betrayed her. Steam slipped out from beneath the cloth. It smelled of roasted chicken, butter crust, thyme, carrots, pepper, and the kind of comfort that made hungry men suddenly believe in mercy. Mayor Edwin Pike stood beside her, sweating as if the sun had chosen him for punishment. Briar Glen had hung bunting from the church porch. The school children had polished their shoes. The farmers had washed the dust from their hats. Even the geese near the trough looked less criminal than usual. The Alpha King had not come for a festival. No one said that aloud. Everyone knew it. For 3 weeks, the werewolves of the Eastern Ridge had been getting sick. Shifts came late or broke halfway. Men woke with fever and wolf eyes. Women felt their beasts clawing from inside without enough strength to come through. Dogs howled toward the old Sparrow Mine. Sheep refused to drink from Silver Run Creek. A blacksmith's son had shifted one paw and one ear during supper, then cried because his soup tasted like metal. The Royal Council had sent clerks, healers, and 2 inspectors with boots too clean for honest work. They found nothing. That was why Alden Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Packs, had come in person. Willa had hoped for someone less overwhelming. A cousin of the king would have been fine. A secretary with poor posture. A cheerful guard who liked pie and asked no difficult questions. Instead, Briar Glen had received the wolf-crowned king. The man who had settled 3 border feuds before 35. The man whose silence made councilmen confess errors they had not yet committed. The man who now held one of Willa's chicken pot pies while his inner wolf sniffed it like a sacred relic. "It smells of butter, smoke, home, and destiny under crust," Brindle declared. "We shall marry at sunset." Willa bit the inside of her cheek. Alden broke the crust. Steam rose between them. For 1 second, something in his severe face softened. It was not a smile. It was the memory of a smile that had been buried under law, duty, and too many rooms full of old men saying impossible things with confidence. He took a bite. Brindle made a sound Willa could only describe as a cathedral bell falling into a feather bed. "Mate," the wolf announced. Willa coughed. Alden's gaze snapped back to her. "Are you well?" The entire square froze. because the Alpha King had just asked a gentle question of the baker's daughter. Willa had no title, no fortune, and no family name beyond a bakery sign painted by her grandfather. She held the basket tighter. "Yes, Your Majesty, flour dust." "That makes no sense," Brindle decided. "Her voice is pretty. I accept the explanation." Alden watched her for one breath longer than he needed to. Willa felt that breath like a warm hand at the back of her neck. Then the mayor cleared his throat and began his welcome speech. No one noticed that Willa stopped listening. She was busy hearing the Alpha King's wolf plan a domestic future involving her bakery, 3 ovens, and, for reasons that were never explained, 4 goats. Willa Hartwell had heard inner wolves since she was 8 years old. They were not human thoughts. She could not hear whether someone hated turnips or lied about taxes, unless that person's wolf had opinions about either subject. Wolves were older things. They lived behind the eyes of shifters. They scented truth before the human tongue found words. Some were calm. Some were vain. Some sounded like tired grandmothers. Some sounded like soldiers who had drunk too much coffee. Willa learned early that mentioning them was a terrible idea. When she was 9, she accidentally told the butcher that his wolf wanted to bite the tax collector. Her mother had taken her into the pantry that night and held both her hands. Hattie Hartwell was a broad-shouldered widow with flour in her hair and no patience for foolishness, but fear had made her voice soft. Some gifts were useful knives, her mother had told her. You carried them quietly, or someone else would try to take the handle. So Willa listened and kept silent. She heard the schoolteacher's wolf weep over an old love. She heard Mayor Pike's wolf beg for 3 days of sleep and no more committees. She heard Mrs. Bellamy's wolf use language that would have cracked church glass when someone ruined soup. Now she heard Brindle. That was the name of the Alpha King's wolf. Willa knew because Brindle announced it to her mind with the importance of a judge entering court. Brindle, guardian of the Blackthorn blood, breaker of winter raiders, terror of the red snow, and apparently a complete disaster in front of a baker with a hot basket. During the inspection of the square, Alden asked precise questions about wells, fevers, failed shifts, livestock, and the old mine road. Willa stayed beside the bakery stall because that was her place. Low, useful, near the ovens. Mayor Pike answered too quickly. Captain May Calder, Alden's guard captain, took notes with the calm patience of a woman who had watched King's Ruin shirts during unexpected shifts. 2 council nobles in green velvet looked at the whitewashed houses as if poverty might leap from the walls and stain them. One of them was Lord Everett Vale. He smelled of expensive cologne, new silver buttons, and soft hands. His smile was smooth. His wolf was not. Willa frowned. Most wolves had texture in her mind. Brindle sounded like warm thunder wearing a crown badly. Mayor Pike's wolf sounded like a blanket being dragged toward a nap. Mrs. Bellamy's wolf sounded like a church bell with opinions. Vale's wolf sounded muffled. It was distant and flattened, as if someone had thrown a heavy cloth over its head. Brindle noticed too, though his attention kept tripping over Willa's basket. "Ask her," the wolf urged Alden. "She knows things. Also pie. But first things, then pie, then marriage." Alden turned his head toward Willa. It was a small movement. The square felt it anyway. The mayor turned. The nobles turned. The fiddler lowered his bow. Suddenly, the baker's daughter, who had not been invited to speak, stood at the center of the royal attention. Alden's voice came even and formal. "Mayor Pike tells me you assist the sick when the healer is unavailable." The phrase was polite, but the nobles stiffened. The word healer meant one thing in a kitchen and another in noble mouths. In a kitchen, it meant relief. In a noble mouth, it often meant suspicion with clean gloves. Willa chose her answer with care. "Small wounds, fevers, and frightened animals, Your Majesty. Nothing official." Alden did not laugh. He did not make the slight face important men made when low women knew too much. He only asked why animals had stopped drinking from Silver Run Creek. Willa looked past the square, down the road that led toward the water. The old church clock struck noon with a cracked note. Beyond the red roofs, the ridge rose beneath the sun. The sealed mouth of Sparrow Mine sat in the rock like a dark scar. Something in the water burns their tongues, Willa answered. Lord Vale gave a soft laugh. Frontier villages often turn weather, sickness, and stubborn sheep into omens. His words were polished. His wolf, buried under that muffling pressure, sent a vibration through Willa's teeth. Lie. The word did not arrive clearly. It came as a broken note under a violin string. It hurt. Alden was not looking at Vale. He was looking at Willa. He had seen the change in her hands, the way her fingers closed around the basket handle. Brindle, for the first time since the pie, stopped sounding in love with dinner and became alert. She knows, the wolf warned. I do not know what she knows, but she knows. Alden, stop being a pretty statue and pay attention. The king ordered an inspection of Silver Run Creek that afternoon. When Willa tried to excuse herself because she had bread cooling and chicken filling on the stove, Alden accepted the excuse with grave courtesy. Then he asked her to join them after the bread was safe. That was how the trouble began. By late afternoon, Willa walked beside the Alpha King on the creek path with a basket of bandages, herb jars, and 2 chicken pot pies she had not meant to bring. They had simply appeared in the basket because her hands were traitors. Alden wore no ceremonial coat now. He had changed into a dark riding shirt, worn gloves and boots that had finally met mud. Without velvet and a crowd, he looked less like a symbol of crown power and more like a tired man who had not been allowed to be only a man in years. Captain May walked several steps behind them. Lord Vale had insisted on coming, of course, claiming the council required a witness to protect crown mining interests. His muffled wolf remained a smothered vibration in Willa's mind. Silver Run Creek cut the valley with water so clear it looked innocent. Willa knelt beside the bank and dipped 2 fingers in. The water was cold. It looked normal. When she brought her fingers near her nose, bitterness pricked the back of her tongue. Not pure silver, washed silver, ground into stone, mixed with old mineral dust and something sharp enough to scrape a wolf's blood raw. A horse screamed on the old mine road. It was Vale's bay gelding, a nervous animal with white showing around both eyes. Willa could not hear common animals the way she heard inner wolves, but animals shouted with their bodies. That horse was shouting with every muscle. Vale dismissed it. He dislikes stones. Willa did not answer. She went to the horse with open hands and the low voice she used for dogs with fever and men who did not want to admit pain. The gelding trembled. His eyes did not fix on the creek. They fixed on the slope below Sparrow Mine. Willa followed that look. There, almost hidden in brush, a gray vein shone where rain had split the ground. It ran down from the mine road like a fresh scar. She pointed. Alden moved to her side at once, tall and warm and silent. Vale laughed again, but this laugh ended early. Sparrow Mine is sealed by Crown decree, Vale said. No one has worked that shaft in 12 years. Lie. The muffled wolf struck again. Willa looked at Vale fully. His wolf was not quiet by nature. His wolf had been forced quiet. Alden did not ask her to explain in front of everyone. That was the first detail that made Willa trust him a little. He only ordered May to send guards to the exposed vein and forbade anyone from touching the soil without royal order. Vale bowed. Willa saw fury pass through his eyes like a shadow. That night, Alden appeared at Hartwell Bakery. Willa was alone, scraping flour from the long work table. The shop smelled of butter, pepper, thyme, warm wood, and the apple cakes her mother had set on the cooling rack. Outside, Briar Glen murmured beneath golden lamps. Inside, the Alpha King filled too much of the doorway. She straightened. Your Majesty. Alden, he corrected. Brindle inside him sat up as if trumpets had sounded. Good. Excellent. We have advanced from Your Majesty to Alden. Next step, shared roof, shared recipes, shared pillow. Be calm. Willa looked at an empty tray until she could trust her face. This is a bakery, she told him. Everyone pays in here, even kings. Alden placed a gold coin on the counter. Willa looked at it with the patience of a woman who had taught many large men not to touch hot pans. That buys the bakery. His expression did not change. I have no copper. That is a serious flaw in royal education. Something happened to the king's face. It was not a smile. It was a crack in winter. Willa felt absurdly pleased. Brindle lost all dignity. She jokes with us. This is progress of historic quality. Alden's official reason for visiting was the water. He asked about the gray vein, the creek, and what she had seen in the horse. Willa explained that the mark had not been there the week before. Old Thomas Hale drove goats along that road every morning. If the hillside had been open, the town would have known. Alden listened the way he did everything serious. Completely. It made every detail feel dangerous. When Willa wrapped 2 chicken pot pies in paper and set them on the counter, his fingers brushed hers. The contact was brief. Nothing improper. Nothing dramatic. Brindle went silent. Heat moved up Willa's arm and settled in her chest. Alden also went still. Then Brindle spoke with a certainty so deep that it no longer sounded ridiculous. Mate. Willa withdrew her hand first. The bell above the door saved them both. Mrs. Bellamy entered with an empty jar and a terrible excuse about needing yeast at that hour. She saw the king, saw Willa, saw the wrapped pies, and her wolf declared with total clarity that Briar Glen had finally become interesting. Willa decided she needed to sleep for 3 days. She did not. During the next week, Alden found reasons to visit the bakery. The first day, he came to inspect flour supplies. Brindle informed Willa that the king had asked 3 guards whether flour inspection sounded like a normal act of government. The second day, he reviewed frontier food stability. Willa handed him a list of broken ovens, unfair salt prices, and a formal complaint about the capital's habit of sending damp sacks during rain season. The third day, there was no excuse. Alden entered, placed 2 exact copper coins on the counter, and requested 1 chicken pot pie with the solemnity of a man asking for safe passage through enemy land. Brindle announced a historic victory. Willa began to expect the visits. That was troubling. She also began hearing more. The sick wolves of Briar Glen sounded out of tune. The bond between human and beast vibrated with a silver edge. It was not black magic. It was not a curse. It was contamination. Something entered the blood through water and weakened the boundary between skin and fur. The only wolf Willa could not understand was Lord Vale's, not because it was naturally silent. Someone had made it silent. Confirmation came on market afternoon. Willa was selling apple buns when Tobin Hale approached her stall. Tobin was Thomas Hale's nephew, a young mine guard with shaking hands and a fresh scar below one ear. He bought a chicken pot pie and claimed he was not hungry. His wolf was screaming. Not the mine, not the bell. The ledger under the bell. Not safe. Willa's blood chilled. Tobin walked away before she could ask anything. Alden arrived 20 minutes later under the official reason of checking market security. Captain May, standing behind him, looked at the pie display and then at his serious face with remarkable restraint. "Your Majesty," Willa greeted him. Alden's gaze moved to the pies. "Miss Hartwell," Brindle sighed. "She has flour on her cheek. Tell her, no, do not stare. Staring is not communication unless you are a barn owl." Willa wiped the wrong cheek. Alden's hand moved, then stopped. He looked as if he had just fought a border war against his own fingers. "Other side," he murmured. Willa cleaned the flour. "Thank you." Brindle groaned. "We could have done that with tenderness. We chose weathered plank energy." Willa bent over the tray and pretended to rearrange pies. Captain May cleared her throat. Her voice carried the dryness of a woman who had watched enough royal awkwardness to qualify for hazard pay. "The market appears secure, Your Majesty." "Good," Alden answered. He did not leave. Willa looked up. Was there another security concern? Alden's eyes fixed on a stack of cooling pies. "The crust." May's eyebrow moved. "The crust," Willa repeated. "It may be unstable." Brindle made a strangled sound. This is worse than the tax voice. Willa lifted one pie and placed it in a paper wrap. "Then you had better remove it from public danger." Alden paid with 2 copper coins. The square watched him walk away holding a chicken pot pie like contraband. By dusk, 3 women had asked Willa if the Alpha King was courting the bakery or the baker. Her mother had opinions. Hattie Hartwell waited until the shop closed. Then she set both hands on her hips and looked at her daughter across the work table. The oven still glowed. The room smelled of peppered gravy, baked apples, yeast, and rain. "That man comes in here too often to be worried about flour," Hattie said. Willa scraped dough from a bowl. "He is investigating the creek." "Does the creek live in my pie case?" "Not officially." Hattie's mouth twitched. "Careful, girl." Willa's hands slowed. Her mother softened, but only around the eyes. Kings do not mean harm every time they notice someone below them. That does not make being noticed safe. "He listens," Willa said before she meant to. Hattie studied her. The bakery seemed to grow quieter. "Then make sure he listens when you say no," her mother answered. Willa nodded. She wished she could explain that Alden had not pushed. He had watched, asked, waited, and looked at chicken pot pie as if it held state secrets. The dangerous part was not that he commanded too much. The dangerous part was that he was trying not to. The investigation deepened. Royal Guards found old cart marks near Sparrow Mine. Someone had dragged ore out at night and washed it in hidden trenches that fed into Silver Run Creek. The silver dust was not enough to kill humans. It was enough to poison the wolf bond slowly. Vale insisted the marks were old. His muffled wolf thrashed so hard in Willa's mind that she tasted iron. Meanwhile, Alden kept returning to the bakery. His excuses grew worse. He inspected the salt shelf for 40 minutes, though he could not tell fine salt from coarse without reading labels. He assessed the back door and became trapped helping Hattie move 2 sacks of flour. He asked about ideal oven heat and listened to Willa's 12-minute explanation with the attention of a man receiving military intelligence. Brindle narrated every failure. "He is here because he missed you." The wolf sounded deeply satisfied. "He thinks asking about yeast is subtle." "It is not subtle. A goat would notice." Willa poured filling into crusts and kept her face calm. She learned to read Alden from the outside while Brindle translated from within. Alden touched his cuff when he wanted to say something personal. He looked at trays when nervous. He became too still when someone mentioned his father. When Willa laughed, that stillness loosened as if her laugh lifted a stone from his chest. One morning, he entered without cloak, escort, or excuse. He sat on the bench beside the oven, where the heat softened even severe faces. Willa was kneading dough. The dough hit the table in a low rhythm, familiar and steady as a heart. Alden watched her hands. After a long moment, he admitted he had no official reason to be there. Willa did not look up. "That is new. I am practicing honesty." Brindle yawned with pleasure. Slow, educable, still underperforming. Willa slid a circle of pastry toward him, followed by a bowl of chicken filling. "If you want to practice, start with folding." The Alpha King of the Northern Pack studied the dough with the concentration other men reserved for peace treaties. He added too much filling. The pastry split on one side like an accusing mouth. Brindle mourned. "Our first pastry child has suffered." Willa laughed. Alden looked up, with flour on his thumb and offense in his eyes. "It is not simple. I did warn you. Not with sufficient gravity." The conversation would have been ridiculous anywhere else. In the bakery, with the oven crackling and rain tapping the back window, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Then Alden set the ruined pie on the table. Willa felt the change before she saw it. The humor left his shoulders. The man beneath looked younger than he did in the square, and more tired than any king should allow. "My wolf recognized you the first day," Alden told her. Willa wiped flour from her fingers with a cloth that did not need so much attention. "I know," she said. Alden blinked. Brindle went absolutely still. The truth settled between the three of them because somehow Brindle was in the room too. Willa had heard everything. The pie, the marriage plans, the goats, the remarks about her braid. The time Brindle called her hands practical and holy. The time Alden practiced asking for bread without sounding lonely. The Alpha King placed both hands on the table and lowered his head. His ears turned red. Willa felt a bright, terrible tenderness. Brindle whimpered. "She heard us be vulnerable and has not fled. Mortifying. Promising." Willa came around the table and stood across from Alden. She kept a respectful space. Some truths needed room to breathe. I was not laughing at you, she told him. His head lifted. Not exactly, she added, because honesty deserved precision. Alden's mouth almost moved. I was laughing because the most serious man I have ever met has a wolf who called chicken pot pie destiny under crust. Brindle gave a quiet huff of pride. Alden closed his eyes. The bakery filled with oven heat, rain sound, and the smell of butter. Willa could see shame moving through him. Not anger, not pride. Shame, old and disciplined, like a dog trained never to bark. Does it change how you see me? He asked. Willa rested one hand on the table near his, not touching yet. Yes. His face closed. It makes you more real, she said. The words stopped him. Brindle, usually impossible to silence, became very quiet. Willa chose each sentence with care. Your wolf noticed the lie in Vale before anyone else. He knew I saw something at the creek. He ran toward me before protocol could argue. Everything you call loss of control sounded like honesty to me. Alden looked as if she had opened a window in a room sealed for years. He spoke of his father then. Not much. Enough. Old King Blackthorn had believed a ruler must be man first and wolf second. The beast was useful in war and dangerous everywhere else. Alden had heard that lesson so often that even love felt like disobedience. Brindle's voice, when it came, was low. He thinks I am the part that makes him weak. Willa's heart hurt. Your wolf is not your weakness, she said. Alden looked at her the way a starving man might look at warm bread and fear it was a dream. I do not know how to ask for what I want without making it sound like an order, he admitted. That explains the flower inspections. His expression cracked. Brindle rumbled with relief. She teases. We live. Willa picked up the ruined pie and placed it on a tray. Practice. So he did. Not with speeches. Not with grand vows. With a second pie, less filling, and the careful humility of a king learning to crimp pastry edges in a bakery that smelled of rain and pepper. The next attempt held together, barely. Brindle declared it fit for diplomatic exchange and possible courtship. Willa told him not to get ambitious. The next several days became a strange pattern of illness, pastry, and royal self-betrayal. Every morning, Willa delivered bread to the sick houses on the East Lane. She carried broth rolls, bitter willow tea, and little hand pies for families too tired to cook. She listened to wolves in fevered rooms and heard the same silver scrape in different voices. Some wolves sounded angry, some sounded lost. One elderly Cooper's wolf spent an entire afternoon insisting the wallpaper was judging him. Willa wrote everything down. She kept the official notes plain. Fever at dawn, failed shift at moonrise, refused creek water, bitter taste after drinking. The private notes were less formal because private truth had less patience. Ned Cole's wolf thinks his left ear is still a paw. Mrs. Bellamy's wolf wants to bite Lord Vale's hat. Mayor Pike's wolf requests soup and fewer speeches. Brindle, when Alden read the notes later, declared the system brilliant. The wolf especially liked the part about biting hats and considered it a useful policy suggestion. Alden did not. He stood in the bakery after closing, one hand on the notes and one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee Hattie had made strong enough to negotiate with death. Willa watched him read by oven light. The hard planes of his face softened when he focused. Not much. Enough that she began to suspect his severity was not coldness. It was armor worn too long. This is more useful than my council reports, Alden said. Willa wiped the work table. Your council reports probably do not include wallpaper. They include worse, Brindle added. They include Lord Marden's 8-page opinion on bridge paint. I lost the will to hunt. Willa snorted. Alden looked up. Flower dust? He asked. Bridge paint, she answered before thinking. The silence that followed was not dangerous. It was worse. It was interested. Alden set the notes down. You heard him. Willa kept wiping the same clean patch of table. Brindle is not subtle. Subtlety is for rabbits and court accountants, Brindle said. Alden closed his eyes as if asking patience from every ancestor in the Blackthorn line. What did he say? He has strong views about bridge paint. Of course he does. Willa looked at him then. The king's mouth held that almost smile again. It was a rare creature. It appeared only near ovens, bad excuses, and evidence that his wolf had been embarrassing him. She wanted to see it more often. That was a problem. The bakery door opened, and Hattie came in from the backyard with a basket of kindling. Her gaze moved from Alden to Willa to the suspiciously clean table. She had the expression of a mother who had raised a daughter, lost a husband, run a bakery, and therefore knew nonsense before it finished entering a room. "Your Majesty," Hattie greeted him. "Are you here for illness, records, or my daughter's pie?" Alden straightened. "Records." Brindle sighed. "Liar." Willa coughed into her sleeve. Hattie put the kindling down. "Then you can review them while moving that flour sack. It is blocking the pantry." Alden looked at the sack. It was not blocking the pantry. It was 6 feet from the pantry and minding its own business. He moved it anyway. Brindle was delighted. "We perform domestic labor. We are nearly married." Willa covered her face with a dish towel. This became the rhythm of Briar Glen's recovery before anyone called it recovery. Alden investigated water routes by day and failed to avoid the bakery by evening. Willa gathered wolf whispers and tried not to look pleased when the bell above the door rang. Hattie found increasingly transparent chores for a king to do and charged him fair prices for pie. Captain May observed all of it. May had the gift of standing in a room as if she were not judging anyone, while clearly judging everyone with military precision. She spent one rainy afternoon at the corner table, cleaning her dagger and watching Alden attempt to ask for another pie without sounding emotionally dependent on poultry. The attempt failed. "Miss Hartwell," Alden began. Willa was glazing apple buns. "Yes, Your Majesty?" He glanced at the display case. "I require 1 chicken pot pie." May did not look up from her dagger. "For state reasons." Alden's jaw tightened. "For supper." Brindle offered a correction. "For longing." Willa set a pie in paper. "Will longing be paying with copper today?" Alden placed the correct coins on the counter with grave care. May sheathed her dagger. "Progress." The king gave her a look that would have silenced a councilman. May lifted both hands. "I am proud of the realm." Willa laughed before she could stop herself. The sound changed the bakery. Alden looked at her and his face lost half its winter. He did not smile fully, not yet, but his eyes warmed. Willa had the sudden foolish thought that if she kept laughing, maybe some part of him would remember how. Brindle was not foolish. Brindle was direct. "Make her laugh again," the wolf urged. "We require it for national stability." The next morning, Alden came with a written list. He claimed it was a formal bakery supply assessment. The list included flour, salt, yeast, pie tins, rolling pins, chimney safety, and a final line that read, in Alden's severe handwriting, "Laughter conditions." Willa stared at it. "Laughter conditions?" she asked. Alden looked at the list as if it had betrayed him. "Captain May added that." From outside the open door, May's voice drifted in. "I did not." Brindle laughed so hard Willa nearly dropped the paper. Alden took the list back with a speed unworthy of royalty. "The final line is not part of the assessment." "That is a shame," Willa said. "It was the most honest part." He looked at her and the almost smile returned. "Then perhaps it remains under review." For one breath, the bakery was warm in a way no oven could explain. Then Hattie shouted from the back room that if the king was reviewing laughter conditions, he could also review the broken shutter. The shutter was not broken. It became broken when Alden tried to prove it was not. Briar Glen spoke of that for 2 days. The comedy helped because the sickness did not stop. Humor did not cure anyone. It did not clean the creek or soften silver dust. But it kept fear from owning every room. Willa learned to use that. When she visited sick wolves, she carried food and bad jokes. She told Ned Cole that if his wolf still thought his ear was a paw, he should at least stop trying to scratch the table with it. Ned laughed until he cried. His wolf, embarrassed, sounded clearer afterward. She brought Mrs. Bellamy soup and asked whether biting Vale's hat would count as medical treatment. Mrs. Bellamy's wolf gave a 20-minute legal argument in favor. Mrs. Bellamy herself pretended not to enjoy it. She brought Mayor Pike a roll and informed him that his wolf had formally requested fewer speeches. The mayor looked wounded, then relieved, then ate the roll in silence. Alden watched one of these visits from the doorway of the Cooper's house. Afterward, as they walked back through the damp lane, he said nothing for so long that Willa began to count puddles. "You make them less afraid," he said at last. Willa tucked her basket closer to her side. "I bring food. Food helps." Food does not tell a man his wolf is still there. She slowed. Rainwater dripped from the eaves. The lane smelled of wet wood, chimney smoke, and the bitter herb bundles hanging over doorways. In the distance, the creek ran too bright beneath gray sky. Alden's voice dropped. When a wolf falls silent, most people assume the worst. Willa told him that sometimes the wolf was only buried under pain. Alden understood the answer beneath the answer and asked if she could hear that difference. Most days, she could. He looked at her. And on the other days? Willa thought of Vale's muffled wolf, the cloth-heavy silence, the pain that struck her teeth. On the other days, she said, I know something is being hidden. Brindle, usually eager to interrupt, stayed quiet. Alden walked beside her without crowding. That had become one of the ways she measured him. He was large, powerful, and used to being obeyed, but he had learned not to take up all the air around her. That was not a small thing. The fourth bakery visit without a convincing reason became a disaster only because of the rolling pin. Alden arrived near closing with Captain May, 2 guards, and Lord Vale, who had inserted himself into the investigation like a thorn into a thumb. Vale smiled at the pie case. His wolf was muffled so tightly that Willa's temples ached. How charming, Vale said. The Crown now conducts policy in kitchens. Hattie, who was arranging cooling racks, looked him up and down. Kitchens feed policy. Try making one decision hungry and see what happens. Brindle admired her. Mother-in-law material. Willa nearly dropped a tray. Alden's eyes cut toward her. He knew that look now. The look of Willa hearing something damaging. Vale walked along the counter and touched a rolling pin with one gloved finger. Frontier wit is often mistaken for wisdom. The rolling pin was Hattie's favorite. The room changed. Every person who had ever worked in a kitchen understood the danger before Vale did. Hattie did not raise her voice. Do not touch that unless you plan to make yourself useful. Vale laughed. It was a small, polished mistake. Alden stepped closer to the counter, but Willa caught his sleeve. Just 2 fingers, a tiny pressure. He stopped. She did not need a king to defend her mother's rolling pin. Hattie handed Vale an apron. The council lord blinked. I beg your pardon? If you are inspecting kitchens, inspect dough. May turned away, but her shoulders moved. Alden's face became a study in royal restraint. Vale refused, of course. That only made it better. Hattie accepted his refusal with deep disappointment and informed him that his judgment on kitchens would therefore be filed as decorative. Decorative, Brindle repeated with reverence. A perfect wound. Willa had to leave the room and pretend to fetch onions. The moment should have stayed comic. Instead, in the pantry's dimness, she heard Vale's wolf clearly for one heartbeat. Bell, iron, names. He knows she hears. Then the muffling slammed down again. Willa gripped the onion crate. The danger had noticed her. She returned to the bakery with onions in her hands and calm on her face. Alden saw through both. After Vale left, he waited until the guards stepped outside. What happened in the pantry? He asked. Willa set the onions down one by one. His wolf broke through. Alden did not interrupt. She told him the words. Bell, iron, names. He knows she hears. The bakery smelled suddenly too sweet. Apple glaze, butter, sugar, and fear. Hattie stood by the stove with both hands flat on the counter. May's dagger was already half drawn. Alden's face turned cold. Brindle did not sound playful now. We end him. Willa looked at Alden. No. His eyes snapped to hers. She warned him not to move without proof, because Vale would destroy whatever was hidden. Alden called it a threat. Willa corrected him with care. Vale had noticed her, and that was not the same. Brindle growled. They are close enough. Willa's voice softened because she heard the fear beneath the wolf's fury. I am not asking you to do nothing. I am asking you to let me find the thing that makes action matter. Alden's hand tightened at his side. He did not like it. He listened anyway. That was when Willa knew the heart of him was not command. It was effort. The silver sickness worsened before it broke. A ridge farmer shifted in the middle of church and could not shift fully back for an hour. A schoolgirl's wolf cried all night in Willa's mind, scared of its own paws. Tobin Hale stopped coming to market. Vale smiled too much. His wolf's muffled agony grew sharper every time anyone mentioned Sparrow Mine. Willa kept notes in a flour ledger because no one questioned a baker writing about measurements. She recorded when the wolves' voices broke, which families drank from the east side, which animals avoided the creek, and which guards Vale moved after dark. Alden read the notes in the bakery after closing. He did not mock the format, though one page had a recipe for herb biscuits in the margin. Captain May stood by the door while rain ran down the windows. This is enough to justify a formal search. Alden's jaw tightened. Vale will move the records before dawn. Willa thought of Tobin's wolf screaming about the bell. Not all records, she said. Both looked at her. She explained the broken words. Not the mine. Not the bell. The ledger under the bell. May's face sharpened. The church bell? Old Mrs. Bellamy keeps the tower locked, Willa said. Vale's men would not expect anyone to search there. Alden's gaze settled on her. We search it together. Brindle approved. Together. Excellent. Sensible. Romantic with evidence. Willa shook her head. If you go near the church with guards, Vale will know. Then May goes quietly. May is captain of the Royal Guard. She is quiet the way thunder is private. May looked pleased rather than insulted. Alden did not. You are not going alone. There it was. Not a command yet. A fear trying to dress as one. Willa understood the fear. She also understood the evidence might vanish. I am going to look, she said. Not fight, not confront. Look. I know that church better than Vale does. Alden went still. Brindle growled softly. We dislike this plan. So do I, Willa answered. Both Alden and May stared at her. Willa realized she had answered the wolf aloud. May's eyes moved between them. That explains several things. Alden's expression did not change, but his ears reddened again. Willa sighed. I can hear Brindle. May leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. I assumed either that or the king had developed a second personality devoted to pastry. Brindle was offended. I am devoted to many things. Alden closed his eyes. Captain. May answered him with perfect military innocence. Alden told her not to enjoy this, and May admitted that order had arrived too late. The humor did not remove the danger. It made the danger bearable. They agreed on a plan. Willa would enter the church by the side door with a lantern and a sack of stale bread, which gave her a plausible reason to feed Mrs. Bellamy's abandoned hens. May would place 2 plainclothes guards near the square. Alden would remain at the mayor's house, visible enough that Vale believed him occupied. Brindle hated every part of it. Willa could feel Alden hating it too. That night, the old church smelled of wax, dust, damp stone, and the faint sourness of rain on ancient wood. Willa slipped through the side door with her lantern low. The cracked bell hung in the short tower above, black against moonlight. Every stair creaked. Every draft smelled faintly of the mine. She found the hollow beneath the bell platform after 10 minutes of feeling along warped boards. A narrow plank lifted under her knife. Beneath it rested a small iron box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were shipping records. Sparrow Mine had not been sealed. It had been worked by night. Silver ore had been ground, washed, and hidden under false freight names. Water had been diverted into the creek after dark. The papers carried Vale's seal and the marks of 2 council clerks. Willa tucked one ledger under her shawl. Then footsteps sounded below. Vale's voice floated up the stairwell, soft and cold. Miss Hartwell, bakers keep unusual hours. Willa's fear became very calm. That happened sometimes. Terror arrived so cleanly that the mind became practical. She thought of dough resting beneath cloth. She thought of which stair creaked least. She thought of where the bell rope hung. Two men climbed behind Vale. They carried short clubs, not swords, quiet weapons. Vale smiled when he saw the open hollow. Curiosity is a dangerous habit in frontier girls. His wolf thrashed behind the muffling spell. Run, it forced through at last. Willa ran, not toward the door, toward the bell rope. One of the men grabbed her arm. The lantern struck the floor and spun light wildly against the stone. Willa dropped the bread sack and threw her whole weight onto the rope. The cracked bell woke with a terrible sound. It was bent, harsh, and enormous. The noise split the night over Briar Glen. Dogs began howling. Somewhere, Mrs. Bellamy's wolf shouted words that would have ended a church meeting. The man tightened his grip on Willa's arm. The ledger slid from under her shawl and fell beneath a bench. Willa had one absurd thought. She had not finished tomorrow's pie crusts. Then she felt something beyond the voices. Willa had heard inner wolves for years, but she had never felt a bond answer from inside her own chest. This was not hearing Brindle. This was Alden, fear and fury cutting straight through the space between them. At the mayor's house, Alden Blackthorne stood so fast his chair fell backward. Brindle did not sound like a ridiculous suitor now. He sounded ancient, huge, and full of teeth. Willa. Alden did not ask how he knew. He shifted in the middle of the room, destroying a shirt, 3 buttons, and a small table Mayor Pike would never mention again without trembling. The Alpha King's wolf went through the window. Willa heard the howl before she saw him. The man holding her froze. Vale's face went pale. The church seemed to bend toward the sound. The wolf came through the side door like a storm made of dark fur and gold eyes. He was enormous, larger than any wolf Willa had seen, with crown power in every muscle. Yet he did not attack blindly. He placed himself between Willa and the men, teeth bared, and the world understood one simple rule. No one would touch her. Brindle roared in her mind. Ours. The wolf turned his head just enough to look at Willa. She understood the question without words. She shook her head once, not badly hurt, frightened, furious, and certain she would have bruises, but whole. The wolf advanced. Vale's men dropped their clubs. Vale tried to speak. His voice failed when May and the royal guards burst into the church, drawn by the bell and the trail of their king. Alden shifted behind a column, and May threw him a cloak with the efficiency of someone who had served a clothing-destroying alpha for years. When Alden stepped out, human again, the black cloak fastened over his shoulders, his face was ice. There were not many words. There did not need to be. The ledger beneath the bench held seals. The box under the bell held routes. The opened hillside held poison. Vale, who had dressed lies in velvet and cologne, stood in a church full of wax and broken sound with nothing pretty left to hide behind. Willa handed Alden the records with dust on her hands. Brindle, still vibrating with fury, spoke low in her mind. She saves herself and brings evidence. Queen. Alden looked at the ledger, then at Willa. The fury did not leave his face. Beneath it, something more dangerous appeared. Pride. Yes, he said quietly, she is. The hearing took place the next day in Briar Glen's town hall because the village had no palace, and because Willa refused to travel to the capital while the water remained poisoned. A royal mirror was set against the far wall, its silvered surface humming with the capital's formal magic. Lord Vale was brought in with his hands bound. The 2 council clerks appeared through a mirror link, pale and offended. Townspeople crowded the benches. Royal guards held the doors. In the front row, Mrs. Bellamy held a prayer book while her wolf insulted noblemen with stunning creativity. Willa stood beside a long table with a clean apron and her hair pinned up. She had slept 1 hour. She felt like bread that had risen badly. Alden stood at the front, not on a dais. That mattered. He did not place himself above the town. He placed himself with it. Vale tried to turn his crimes into administrative errors. The council clerks tried to turn Willa into a frontier superstition. The word witch appeared like a stone thrown into the center of the room. For 1 second, old fear, lifted its head inside her. The fear of the child taught to hide. The fear of the woman who had heard too much and pretended to know too little. Alden took one step. Willa lifted her hand. The king stopped. Brindle stopped too, though he did it with great resentment. She wants to speak, the wolf said. Let her bite. Willa faced the room. She looked at Vale. She looked at neighbors who had known her since childhood. She looked at nobles waiting for her to fall. She looked at Alden, who watched her as if her choice mattered more than any decree. She had spent her life pretending not to hear. Silence had protected no one. Yes, Willa said. Her voice was not loud, but it reached the walls. I hear things. The murmur rose. She waited for it to pass over her like wind over a roof. A good doe could not be forced, neither could truth. Willa explained that she did not hear human thoughts. She heard inner wolves when truth fought fear, pain, or lies. She heard when a beast was hurt. She heard when one had been forced quiet. As she spoke, Vale lost color. His wolf pushed from inside like an animal hearing rescue steps. Willa described the muffling spell, mute root and silver dust pressed into tea or wine for months. Vale had silenced his own wolf so it could not betray him. The room that began with suspicion became still. Not because people were afraid of Willa, because she was too precise. Then Vale's wolf broke through one more time. Bell. Iron plate. Second box. Names under the iron. Willa opened her eyes. There is another box in the bell tower, under an iron plate. May left with 2 guards. No one spoke while they waited. Alden stepped closer to Willa, just enough that his presence became an anchor, not a shadow. Brindle was unusually quiet. For the first time since Willa had heard him, he made no jokes, planned no weddings, and mentioned no pies. He only repeated one word with fierce tenderness: brave. May returned with a second iron box. The names were there. So were the seals. The council clerks in the mirror began speaking at the same time. Alden lifted one hand. The mirror went silent. He did not shout. He did not need to. True authority did not push. It filled the room like thunder before it broke. The Alpha King announced that Vale's seized assets would repair the water. Sparrow Mine would fall under crown control until the creek ran clean. Forced workers would receive protection. Inspectors who had lied would answer to law. Then he turned to Willa. The entire room followed his gaze. Alden named her advisor for Frontier Pack Health and Living Waterways. Her gift, he said, was not shame and not superstition. It was the reason Briar Glen still had a chance. Willa's eyes burned. Vale gave a bitter laugh. You would put a baker in council? Alden did not look at him. He looked at Willa. I will put the only person who heard the truth in council, he said. Titles heard polished lies and called them records. Brindle sighed inside her. Also, she makes pie. Willa had to press her lips together. Alden noticed. For the first time in public, the Alpha King smiled. It was small. It was real. It ruined the dignity of several nobles who did not know what to do with a happy king. The following weeks smelled of lime wash, clean water, and bread. Sparrow Mine was sealed properly. New channels carried clean water past the town. Sick wolves were treated with sweet salt baths, bitter tonics, and mandatory rest, which became the most insulted medicine in Briar Glen history. Willa worked until her hands ached. Her new title did not make her less a baker. It only made more people call her advisor Hartwell while she carried flour sacks. Alden stayed. At first, he said it was to supervise the repairs, then to review documents, then to ensure the guard fulfilled its duties. Briar Glen had survived drought, taxes, and 3 generations of mayors with heroic mustaches. It also survived watching the Alpha King invent reasons to enter a bakery. Brindle narrated every attempt with pride. The king inspected the salt again, though the salt had not changed. The king examined the back door and became trapped moving flour. The king asked about oven heat and listened as if crust temperature might save the realm. Willa should have been annoyed. She was not. The town noticed. Briar Glen was small enough that a sneeze in the church porch became a weather report by supper. The Alpha King visiting Hartwell Bakery twice could be called duty. 5 times became speculation. 9 times became entertainment. Mrs. Bellamy began bringing her mending to the bench across the street. She claimed the light was better there. Her wolf claimed she wanted a good view of the tall fool learning courtship by pastry. Mayor Pike started taking the long way past the bakery every afternoon. His wolf hoped someone would offer him soup. His human mouth pretended to discuss water repairs. Old Thomas Hale brought his goats through the square and paused outside the bakery window because the goats had opinions about Alden. Willa could not hear goats the way she heard wolves, but their faces suggested harsh judgment. Brindle, offended, insisted goats had no sense of romance. Hattie enjoyed all of it more than a mother should. She found tasks for Alden whenever he arrived. The front step needed sweeping. The flour scale needed testing. The back shelf needed moving 3 inches left, then 2 inches right, then 1 inch left again, because Hattie had standards. Alden completed every task with grim royal focus. Brindle considered this proof of devotion. Willa considered it proof that the Alpha King had never faced a bakery owner with a wooden spoon. One afternoon, Hattie handed him a crate of apples and directed him to the cellar. Alden took the crate. "Is this part of waterway repairs?" "It is part of not dropping apples," Hattie answered. Willa stood by the oven with her arms crossed. A vital branch of government. The king looked at her over the crate. "I am beginning to suspect your mother is assigning false royal duties." Hattie did not look up from her dough. "If it needs doing, it is not false." Brindle sighed. Wisdom. Terrifying wisdom. Alden carried the apples. The cellar stairs were narrow. The crate was wide. Alden, who had faced hostile alphas without blinking, spent nearly a full minute negotiating with a turn in the wall. Willa watched from the doorway. "Do you require a counsel?" she asked. Alden's voice came from below. "No." Something bumped. An apple rolled up 1 step and back down. Brindle reported with dignity that the architecture had attacked first. Willa laughed so hard she had to grip the doorframe. When Alden emerged, 1 apple rested in the crook of his elbow, another in his coat pocket, and 1 somehow sat on his shoulder. His face had returned to royal stone. That only made it worse. Hattie removed the apple from his shoulder. Efficient storage. May, who had entered during the crisis, looked at the king and then at Willa. "Should I record this in the daily security report?" Alden brushed dust from his sleeve. "No." "The apples may disagree," Willa murmured. Brindle announced that if she laughed again, the apples had died with honor. The recovery work also brought tenderness into places Willa did not expect. Alden visited sick wolves with her now, not as a king arriving to inspect damage, as a man learning how to sit in small rooms and be useful. He chopped wood for the Cole family because Ned's hands shook. He fixed a loose shutter for Mrs. Bellamy and accepted 7 separate criticisms of his technique from her wolf. He carried water for a schoolgirl whose shift had failed, then let her wolf sniff his sleeve until it stopped trembling. The first time a sick child asked if the Alpha King ever got scared, the room went still. Willa stood near the hearth with a bowl of broth. She expected Alden to offer a king's answer, something polished, something about courage. Instead, he sat on the stool beside the child's bed. "Yes," he said. The child blinked. "Of what?" Alden looked at the small wolf ears that still had not faded from the child's hair. "Of failing people who trust me." Brindle whispered in Willa's mind. "And of losing you." "He will not say that part." "Coward." Willa almost spilled the broth. The child considered the answer, then asked if kings had to drink bitter tonic, too. Alden looked at the cup Willa held. Willa held it out. The Alpha King drank the bitter tonic without changing expression. It was an impressive act of rule. Then his eyes watered. The child laughed. Her wolf laughed too, weak but clear. Alden handed the cup back to Willa with his dignity in ruins and his purpose accomplished. Outside, as they walked back toward the bakery, Willa told him that had been kind. "It was vile," Alden answered. Willa asked whether he meant the tonic or the kindness. Alden clarified that the tonic had been vile. The kindness had been survivable. Brindle objected. "We are brave. We drank swamp punishment for a child." "Brindle wants credit," Willa said. Alden's gaze slid toward her. "He can have half." "Only half?" "He complained first." For once, Brindle accepted the ruling. The more the town healed, the less Alden could pretend he stayed only for duty. He tried anyway. He attended a meeting about new creek stones and asked Willa afterward whether stone placement affected bakery deliveries. It did not. He inspected the well pulley and somehow ended up holding Willa's basket. He reviewed the town's emergency grain stores, then asked if chicken pot pie counted as emergency grain. Willa told him it counted as emergency comfort. Brindle immediately requested 3. The council envoys in the capital grew restless. Letters arrived with red wax seals and stiff phrases about proper royal presence, capital expectations, and the optics of frontier delay. Alden read them at the bakery table with a face that became colder line by line. Willa rolled dough across from him. The late afternoon sun lit the flour on her hands. Outside, clean water carts rattled toward the east lane. "They want you back," she said. Alden observed that they always wanted him where he was least useful. Willa called that inconvenient, and he answered that it was government. Brindle grumbled that the capital had no Willa, no decent pie, and too many chairs designed by enemies of the spine. Willa pressed a pastry circle into a tin. "You cannot stay in Briar Glen forever because the chairs are better." Alden folded the letter. No. The word lay between them. He could not stay only because chairs were better. He could stay for another reason if he was brave enough to name it. Willa did not help him. Not yet. She had spent her life swallowing truths for other people. She would not drag this one from his mouth just to soothe him. Hattie entered, saw the silence, and reversed out of the room carrying nothing. Brindle whispered, "We have frightened the mother." "Impossible," Willa said under her breath. "Nothing frightens my mother." Alden's mouth moved. What did he say? Willa told him Brindle had overestimated himself. Alden accepted that as familiar behavior. The almost smile came, then faded. Alden looked down at the letter. "If I ask you to come to the capital, I fear it will sound like a command." Willa's hands stilled. There it was, the shape of the thing. "Are you asking me?" she said. He looked at her. "I am trying to learn how." Brindle was silent. That silence touched Willa more than his jokes. She dusted flour from her hands. "My oven is here, my mother is here. The creek work is not finished." He knew. When Willa added that her new office was only a shelf beside the flour bin, Alden considered it a poor office. She considered the snacks excellent. Alden nodded gravely. "That is important." Willa stepped closer to the table. "If I ever come to the capital, it will be because we decide how my work continues, not because a crown pulls me by the sleeve." His shoulders eased. "Good, good. I would hate myself if I became one more man who took you from a place that needs you." Willa had no joke ready for that. Brindle did. "We could move the entire bakery to the capital." "No," Willa and Alden said at the same time. They looked at each other. Then they laughed. The moment did not solve everything. It did something better. It proved the question could be held without breaking them. The next day, Alden made his worst chicken pot pie yet. He had improved enough to become overconfident. That was always the most dangerous stage of learning. He rolled the crust too thin, added too much filling, and attempted an ornamental leaf pattern that looked like a wounded moth. Hattie stared at it. May stared at it. Willa stared at it. Brindle, after a long silence, declared it abstract. Alden held the tray with both hands. It has structural integrity. The pie chose that moment to leak gravy onto his boot. Willa bent over the table and laughed until her ribs hurt. Alden looked at the ceiling with the patience of a saint under trial. "It betrayed me." May folded her arms. "Your Majesty, the pie had warning signs." Hattie wiped the counter. "Never trust thin crust with ambition." Brindle was solemn. A lesson for kings. Alden looked at Willa. She was laughing openly now, no hand over her mouth, no fear that joy would be punished. Flour dusted her cheek. Her braid had loosened. Her eyes were wet from laughter. Something in his face softened so fully that the room quieted. Willa noticed. So did everyone else. Hattie picked up a towel and walked into the pantry with May. Neither needed a towel. Alden set the wounded pie down. "You look happy here," he said. Willa's laughter faded into a smile. "I am." I want to be part of that. No title, no excuse, no inspection of salt. Just truth. Brindle did not speak. Willa suspected he had both paws over his own mouth. She reached across the table and touched Alden's flour-covered hand. Then stay long enough to learn the difference between confidence and too much gravy. His fingers turned under hers. That may take years. Good. The word was small. It was almost everything. One morning, Alden arrived with no excuse at all. He sat on the bench near the oven while Willa shaped dough. Sunlight crossed the table. Flour floated in the air like pale dust. The town outside had begun to sound healthy again. Hammers struck new water gates. Children shouted near the square. A dog barked without pain in it. Alden watched the dough beneath her hands. I want to stay, he said. Willa's palms slowed. Brindle held his breath inside the king, which was impressive for a creature with no physical lungs. Alden continued before silence could become a wall. He did not want to stay only until the water was clean, not only until the council stopped asking stupid questions. He wanted to stay where Willa was. He wanted to make room for her bakery beside his world, not drag her out of one life and trap her in another. Willa did not move. If she moved too fast, the moment might break. She was not noble. She would say inconvenient things in meetings. She would charge him for pie, crown or no crown. If Brindle mentioned goats again, she would negotiate downward with force. Alden laughed. It was a whole laugh, warm and unexpected, the kind that should have lived in him for years and had waited for a safe kitchen. 2 goats, he offered. Brindle objected. 4. 3, Willa allowed. As a future discussion, Alden looked at her with a mix of wonder and surrender that was becoming dangerous to her heart. She placed both floury hands against his dark shirt. Beneath the cloth, his heart beat strong. She felt the man. She felt the wolf. For once, they did not sound like 2 forces fighting in one skin. They sounded like one breath. Yes, Willa said. Alden went still as if the word had changed gravity. The kiss was soft at first because he was careful even when he trembled. Willa slid one hand to his jaw and showed him he did not have to be quite so careful with joy. He answered with a low sound, almost a sigh. The world narrowed to oven warmth, flour, strong arms, and the quiet light of the bond between them. Brindle, with admirable restraint that lasted exactly 2 seconds, declared that the chicken pot pie had been right. Willa laughed against Alden's mouth. The king laughed too, and this time he did not hide it. A month later, the royal council came to Briar Glen for Willa's formal recognition. Willa found the ceremony unnecessarily solemn. Alden found it insufficiently solemn. Brindle found it undersupplied with chicken pot pie. The square where everything began was full again, but the air had changed. Silver Run Creek ran clean. Thomas Hale's goats drank without insulting the water with their eyes. The sick wolves were healing. The cracked church bell had been repaired and now rang clear above the roofs. Alden stood before the town and the capital envoys. He announced that Willa Hartwell would serve as permanent advisor for living waterways and pack health. Not behind the throne. Not as decoration. With her own seal, her own voice, and the right to contradict the king in public if the king became an idiot. That last phrase was not in the official document. Willa had added it. Alden confirmed it anyway. The square did not know what to do with that. Half the town applauded because they loved Willa. The other half applauded because Mrs. Bellamy turned around and glared at them. The capital envoys clapped with the cautious rhythm of people who suspected history was happening and wished it had submitted paperwork first. Willa stood beside Alden with the official seal in her hand. It was heavier than she expected. Not because of the metal, because of all the silence it ended. For years, her gift had lived in pantries, sick rooms, and the space behind her teeth. She had used it quietly. She had pretended her guesses came from herbs, observation, or luck. Now the whole square knew. The old fear still moved in her stomach, but it no longer had the room to stand tall. Brindle's voice brushed her mind. They see you. Willa looked at Alden. His expression remained composed for the council. His eyes were not. They were warm, steady, and fixed on her as if the square, the nobles, and the restored bell mattered less than whether she could breathe through this moment. Then Mayor Pike stepped forward with a parchment of thanks. He had written too much. Everyone knew it before he cleared his throat. His own wolf began begging for mercy by the third sentence. By the fifth, Brindle was making a sound like a dramatic collapse. By the seventh, Mrs. Bellamy's wolf suggested that the repaired bell could be used as a weapon. Willa pressed her lips together. Alden leaned very slightly toward her. Is the mayor's wolf suffering? Willa kept her eyes forward, deeply. So is mine. So is the town. The mayor continued with the bravery of a man unaware that 3 inner wolves had resigned from public life. Finally, Hattie walked up to the speaking platform with a tray covered in a blue cloth. She did not ask permission. Hattie had never considered permission a useful ingredient. Mayor, she called, before the pies go cold. The square cheered with the relief of a town rescued from civic gratitude. Mayor Pike surrendered the parchment. Hattie uncovered the tray. Small chicken pot pies steamed in neat rows, their crusts brushed gold. The scent rolled through the square. Butter, chicken, thyme, pepper, carrots, and home. It was the same smell that had started everything, only now the town understood the joke. Alden looked at the tray. Brindle whispered with awe. The sacred circle closes. Willa almost laughed into her sleeve. Hattie handed Alden the first pie. 2 copper. Every noble envoy went still. Alden reached into his coat and produced 2 copper coins. The square erupted. It was not polite applause this time. It was laughter, cheers, whistles, and 1 goat bleating with suspicious timing. Alden paid with total dignity, which made the entire thing worse and better. Hattie took the coins. Royal education has improved. Willa could not stop smiling. Alden turned toward the crowd with the pie in his hand. For a moment, it looked like he might retreat into ceremony. He could have given another formal speech. He could have hidden the tenderness under rank, gratitude, and titles. Instead, he looked at Willa. Brindle went very quiet. That silence told her what was coming before Alden spoke. There is one more matter, Alden said. The square settled. Willa's heart did not. Alden did not take her hand. Not yet. He did not presume before everyone. He stood close enough to be with her and far enough to leave the choice visible. Willa Hartwell is not honored today because she fed a king, he told the town. She is not honored because the crown finds her charming, though my wolf has made his opinion on that subject impossible to ignore. Laughter moved through the square. Brindle sounded proud, accurate. Alden's mouth curved for 1 heartbeat, then his voice deepened. She is honored because she heard pain when others dismissed it. She heard truth when titled men hid behind polished lies. She stood in a church tower with fear at her back and evidence in her hands. She did not wait to be rescued before she acted. Willa's throat tightened. He turned then, not to the envoys or the mayor, but to her. And I choose her, Alden said. The words landed softly and still reached every corner of the square. Not as a reward, not as a command, not as a crown taking what it wants. I choose her because she taught me to listen to the part of myself I had been trained to silence. I choose her because she tells me the truth when I am being an idiot. Mrs. Bellamy made a delighted sound. Hattie nodded once, satisfied. Willa could barely see Alden through the sudden sting in her eyes. If she will have me, he continued, I will make room for her bakery beside my council, her voice beside my crown, and her pies in every negotiation where sense is required. Brindle finally broke. And goats. Willa laughed through the tears. Alden heard it, and the formal shape of him softened. The goats remain under negotiation. That finished the square. Even the capital envoys laughed, though 2 looked ashamed of themselves for it. Alden held Willa's gaze. He waited as he had waited in the town hall, as he had waited in the bakery, as he had learned to wait whenever the answer needed to be hers. Willa stepped closer. I will have you, she said. The square cheered before she could add the conditions, so she lifted 1 finger. Briar Glen, trained by Hattie Hartwell and many years of hot ovens, quieted quickly. Willa made the terms clear. She would keep the bakery. She would argue in council. Alden would pay for pie like every other person with a mouth and a debt to civilization. Brindle would not interpret every chicken pot pie as a marriage proposal. Alden accepted the first 3 terms with solemn speed. Then he looked briefly distant, listening inward. He refuses that term. Brindle objected with wounded dignity. I prefer sacred domestic treaty. Willa folded her arms. Absolutely not. Alden's eyes warmed. Negotiations remain open. The town cheered again. This time, Alden offered his hand. Willa took it. His fingers closed around hers, careful and sure. The public square, the council envoys, the repaired bell, the clean creek, and every wolf on the ridge seemed to hold the moment with them. It was not a fairy tale rescue. It was better. It was a choice made in daylight. After that, Briar Glen became impossible to manage for several minutes. Mrs. Bellamy cried into her best lace handkerchief while her wolf demanded a hymn with more drums. Mayor Pike tried to begin another speech and was stopped by 3 separate townspeople offering him pie. Thomas Hale's goats escaped their rope, marched toward the bakery stall, and began eating the decorative ribbon from the table. Brindle considered the goats an omen and immediately revised his domestic plans upward. Willa refused. Alden, still holding her hand, asked how many goats were now under discussion. None in public, Willa told him, his mouth curved. A wise policy, Brindle disagreed. Cowardice disguised as governance. Willa squeezed Alden's fingers, and he made the smallest sound of amusement. It was not enough for the whole square to hear. It was enough for her. The capital envoys approached next. They came in a neat line, each face wearing the expression of a person trying to bow to a baker without letting ancestors notice. The oldest envoy, a thin man with silver hair and a pinched mouth, congratulated Willa on her appointment. His words were correct. His tone suggested he had swallowed a lemon with legal training. Willa thanked him sweetly. His inner wolf, much to her surprise, whispered that the lemon man was frightened of Hattie. That improved Willa's mood. Hattie stood behind the pie stall, arms folded, wooden spoon tucked under one elbow like a royal scepter. She had not cried during Alden's speech. She had not cried during the ring of applause. She did, however, look at Willa with a softness that made Willa's chest ache worse than tears. Alden stepped toward her mother. The square watched with renewed interest because an alpha king facing a baker's mother was better than any formal entertainment the council had provided. Mrs. Hartwell, Alden began. Hattie lifted one brow. Your Majesty. Brindle whispered to Willa, this may be more dangerous than the church. Alden did not flinch. I will honor her work. Hattie informed him that he had better. Alden promised he would not remove Willa from the bakery, and Hattie made it clear he could try at his own risk. Alden's eyes warmed. I would fail. That was the correct answer. Hattie looked him over for another long second. Then she picked up a small chicken pot pie and held it out. 2 copper, Alden paid. No king had ever looked more relieved to be charged. Captain May, standing nearby, recorded something in her notebook. When Willa asked what it was, May claimed she was updating the security report. Brindle insisted the entry read, Alpha King survived maternal inspection, morale improved. The repaired church bell rang once above the square. The sound was clear now, not cracked, not panicked. It rolled over the roofs and toward the clean creek, where sunlight broke across the water in silver that no longer hurt. Willa listened. For the first time in weeks, the town's inner wolves did not sound scraped or broken. They sounded tired, hungry, curious, and full of gossip. In other words, they sounded alive. That was when the weight of the day truly reached her. She had not only survived being seen, she had been believed. Alden must have felt her hand tremble because his thumb moved once across her knuckles. No grand gesture, no claim, just a quiet anchor in the noise. Still breathing? He asked. Willa told him mostly. Alden approved, and she asked him the same. He glanced toward Hattie, the goats, the envoys, and the tray of pies. Under pressure. Willa laughed, and this time the whole square heard. When the ceremony ended, the nobles tried to decide whether to applaud or faint from lack of tradition. Alden approached Willa with a basket. She smelled it before she saw it. Baked pastry, warm filling, one burned edge. Inside sat a crooked chicken pot pie, golden on one side, pale on the other, with a seam that had lost its battle against gravy. I made it with minimal supervision, Alden told her. Brindle corrected him at once. Intense supervision from 3 cooks, 1 captain, and me. Willa looked at the pie as if it were a jewel. It was terrible. She loved it. Then Alden took a simple gold ring from the basket. Not a heavy crown jewel. A warm old piece, worn at the edges, set with a small honey-colored stone. It was my mother's, he said. The square quieted. Alden's voice remained steady, but Willa knew him well enough now to see the tremor in his hand. She told me a queen was not the woman who sat highest. She was the woman who taught the king to listen better. Willa could not speak. For once, Brindle could not either. Alden did not kneel. Willa was grateful. The square was already emotional enough. Instead, he offered the ring with both hands, the way a person offered bread, clean water, or a truth worth keeping. I am not asking you to leave your ovens, he said. I am asking you to let me make room beside them. Willa took the ring. When she put it on, the square burst into applause. Wolves howled from the ridge. Mrs. Bellamy cried into a handkerchief while her wolf demanded someone pour wine. Hattie Hartwell stood near the bakery stall, wiping her eyes with the corner of her apron. Then she pointed at Alden with a wooden spoon. She still charges for pie, Hattie called. Alden bowed his head. As she should. Brindle sounded deeply moved. A noble family. That night, after everyone left, Willa and Alden returned to the bakery. The kitchen was warm. Moonlight rested over the rooftops. On the table, the crooked chicken pot pie sat on a plate like a small act of faith. Alden sat on the bench near the oven. Willa leaned against his shoulder. For years, hearing wolves had been a burden. It had been an open door into secrets, a reason to hide, a knife carried quietly. Now, in a kitchen that smelled of thyme and wood smoke, with the Alpha King learning to stay and his wolf finally allowed to rest, her gift no longer felt like a blade. It felt like a way home. Alden broke the crooked pie in two and offered her half. The edge was too hard, the filling was good, the shape was a disaster. Somehow that made it perfect. To our first domestic treaty, Alden said. Willa lifted her half. To 3 goats as a future discussion. Brindle growled gently. Negotiations remain open. Alden laughed under his breath. Willa laughed with him. Outside, Briar Glen slept beside clean water. Inside, the oven held its last coals. The ring shone on Willa's hand, and the wolf who had mistaken chicken pot pie for a marriage proposal said one word in her mind. Home. No one had to pretend they had not heard. Thank you for listening. If this story grabbed your heart, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our next story. We'll see you in the next one.